Welcome to the
Great.
second session of day two, and I want to introduce you all to our speaker, Jessica. Jessica, take it away.
Thank you. It is such a privilege to be with all of you today. Around the world, we've from South Africa, from the other side of the world, and that is quite incredible to be able to connect with other grad students at levels, with all of you. So we are crossing many boundaries right now while the world goes into many stages of lockdown. So I'm delighted to be with all of you. I thought it would be really helpful for us to share a little bit through a presentation. I know it's nice to also connect face to face. So I said to Alante, I'm going to do my best to switch between my presentation and also face to face. But just a personal connection these days. And it's just so wonderful that when things are being cancelled, here we have 137 people gathering. That is just quite extraordinary. So just a shout out moment there for that. Okay, I'm not going to take too much time. Let's see if we can do this fairly efficiently. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. I'd love some thumbs up in the comments when you can see it. Share. Ooh. Yes. Alrighty. Great. So our discussion today is really about personal branding, and I titled my talk today with you all, The Invisible CV That Everyone is Talking About, because believe it or not, historically, traditionally, everyone made a big deal about CVs. Rightfully so. It was the tool previously to get into the job, to secure that scholarship, to secure your place in the world. And things have changed. And that is really a testimony to the fact that we can't sit and be complacent, but we should be changing and making a fresh, rethinking the way that we are doing work, doing academia in the real world, but also online. And that's really, there's like a tension that happens there. And I'm excited to talk with all of you about that today. So my name is Jessica Renassen. I'm also a PhD candidate, so in grad school myself at the moment. This is my second year in social work. And my background is really in early childhood development, which of your traditional social worker. I am not that. So that's a really exciting opportunity for me to be presenting to you all today, because I would love to challenge you to rethink your own stereotype of your own profession. And I think that's something that grad school allows for, because learning is a part of the way that grad school is designed. And that's been my experience. And since we're talking personal and personal branding, I'd like to use my story to share with you, not because I have this all together, very much human, and make mistakes in this journey. And I feel like that's really a theme coming out of the summit, is the humanity behind the excellence and behind this high achieving kind of status we try to pursue. But I hope that the personal side of my story would inspire you. Maybe you can learn from some of my mistakes, and yeah, really just allow for this to forward think your own personal brand as you've grad school. I know some of you are coming in, leaving, so yes. Just a bit of background about me. There's my map. There I sit at the bottom. I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa. We're on day 50 of our lockdown, so it's been a while. But I'm very proud to be living on the African continent, to be investing in what is happening here. And I think that is part of my story, because I am loving local and living a life that really does invest in my community. And I believe that research should be relatable, no matter where you are in the world. If you are not able to convey the work you're doing, it's actually very difficult for people to get on board with you. So a little bit about my background. I did my bachelor's at the University. So you'd think, hey, this girl's going to get a job. That was not the truth. Went on to do my master's, not because I couldn't get a job, because I felt I needed to learn so much more. And I think that's a narrative we often get told, is you have to know enough before you can enter the real world, which isn't actually true. Nonetheless, I went on an incredible journey of research through my master's at Stellenbosch University. And this process allowed me to start to engage with people from other disciplines. And that would really be one of my first personal learning moments, is that by connecting with other disciplines, you branch out from your thinking that often becomes very insular and very, oh, I wish you could all see me. I'm moving my hands frantically as we go. But it becomes very boxed. And that's great. My experience is that often the more dynamic projects come out of a place of risking, and that involves incorporating other disciplines. And so all of a sudden I started to talk to people from health and nutrition, and this impacted early childhood development. It made sense for me. I know some of you are from ecology and environmental science. There's some humanities. Shout out to the humanities people out there. But what I found entering the working world was that it didn't match academia the way I thought it would. I didn't think that all these accolades would, mean that I could generate a certain income, that I could move around and get onto the platforms that I felt so passionate about getting onto. It was really hard, actually. And, I could claim to have excelled, and yet I struggled to communicate that at first. And that's a little bit of the history that I'd like to share with you. So what is a personal brand? I think that does matter in this conversation. And if you look that up in the dictionary, you will find quite a one-dimensional definition, really just talking to marketing, which unfortunately is no longer the case, because not all that glitters is gold. I think we've learned over time that you can see something in a book in a shop. Think about 7-year-old you waiting for a Christmas present that you saw on TV or in a magazine, and all of a sudden you see it in the shop and it's not quite what you'd expected. And I think that lesson has kind of trickled into our everyday lives. I would challenge the idea that online branding, it is it's the person. And I'd challenge your name there to go, oh, who do we have online here? Oh, it's Jessica, we need to refer you to her because she is the one. You have to speak to her. And that matters when we're talking about personal branding, because a personal brand is the way that you are perceived by people, not only when you're in the room, when you leave. And that's why referrals matter. Networking, very, very helpful. And we are in a stage of life where all of a sudden many of the traditional networking opportunities are actually not available to us the way that they were before. And so again, we're having to rethink, how do we network? How do we connect with each other? And a huge thumbs up to doing a virtual online summit, because conferences aren't able to meet. And that's actually what academia has hedged itself on for years and years. A personal brand is your ability to contribute, to communicate what you're up to. You can be brilliant, but if you're not able to be found, it's actually really difficult to tell the world you're brilliant, because you're just sitting a needle in a haystack. And I'm sure there are incredible, brilliant projects sitting in this participant audience list right now. And the way that you communicate could be your X factor moment when somebody finds you through various channels, and we'll talk about that more. But the way you communicate does matter. And my experience has been, the more I've communicated, the better I've gotten at it. leads me to my next point. I'm beating myself to it here. To pilot and test your ideas. We should be trialing and error. We should be living a trial and error life of risk, because personal branding is about trying things and seeing if they fit. They have to be true to you, and we'll speak more about that. But I think the more we try things and risk in the way that we communicate, the more we're able to grow and challenge ourselves. And that's been my experience, particularly with starting my podcast. I'll share more about that. I wish I could go back. I'm giving away parts of the end of my presentation now. But if I could go back and say to, graduate school Jess, just when she began, I wish I could say to her, risk. Don't stop applying. Don't stop creating, because it's that brand that continues and leaves a legacy behind you. It's important to cultivate values over time. Not that values change. I think values are very much intrinsic of who we are, and hopefully you are finding values in your work and in your identity that are very foundational to your work. But I also think at different times of a person's career, different values matter. If you ever speak to an undergrad student, you will know that passing matters. But as you proceed through undergrad, not only does passing matter, but all of a sudden you realize quality matters too. And I think when you speak to grad students, it's also a case of, what is my and this is probably what you were all expecting me to say first, is branding is your look and your flavor and your feeling. And yes, fonts and text and color does come into that. And I chose purposefully to fill my page with all kinds of colorful words right now and not stick with the same old black font, because every single person is unique and different. And you want to talk diversity, good. Do that, because academia needs more of it. We want to talk about every person's flavor mattering. And that's what makes you niche, believe it or not, is that you bring this unique value, this unique ability to communicate what you're doing. And branding and flavor and text can help, but it's also about all these other things that support you in building that brand. In some ways, add credibility. Okay, are we all doing okay? So, I'm having the best time. There is an ability to sometimes disregard personal branding, and I think that is because we see our career path as linear, which it isn't always. So, maybe some of you that are visual learners will insert your name, but your journey as whoever the student towards the professional, because that's what we're heading to, right? We're all heading towards some kind of profession or job, the job market. But then you realize when you're in the job market, well, I actually want to grow. And that was my experience. I worked in the nonprofit world for 5 years, and I felt like I kept hitting the ceiling. And so I actually then ended up going back to study. So we see it as being linear, but this process is very much not linear. It is progressive, but it doesn't always mean you will. Is that personal branding can actually help you address every one of these stages without having to be in them, because all of a sudden you can start to present yourself to the corporate world before you're even in it. You can start to present yourself towards experts, even if it means joining Twitter and joining the pool of experts that are on there talking about your topic of interest. And then we think, okay, we'll climb the corporate ladder. My naive out of grad school was, I'll work hard and I'll work as hard as I liked, but if I wasn't able to further who I was in the sector that I was working in, I was struggling to gain contracts. I was struggling to secure the funding to live the dream job, in inverted commas. And so I found that my journey from the professional towards consultant and consultant towards entrepreneur was actually very vague. And that's something that I think is a conversation we should be having with every grad student ever, is that university doesn't have to start when you leave graduate school. It can start today. It can start, it doesn't have to start today, but it can. And your brand will help you grow that business mindset that can lead to a financial contribution towards your life. And we must talk livelihood. We have to talk money. As a social worker, it makes me feel awkward because we're trained to help and money shouldn't be a problem. But actually, money does matter. And you should have value behind what you're contributing. You are an expert, whether you're studying anthropology or sociology, whether you are in the sciences, political science, your value, your contribution should be able to reap financial benefits that will allow you to travel, to, well, not that many of us can do that now, but travel, to experience life, to be able to support our families. Because if we are honest about ourselves, and I think that's where personal branding has been underplayed, is that branding is not only for the big corporates who have big budgets behind it. It's not about being what's the right word, the next Nike. It's really about making your mark and just doing it for you. And I think that's really powerful. Okay, I'm gonna move along. So who you are matters. And here's another conversation which is so exciting to me, because each one of you is bringing this unique flavor to the table. It would be amazing to hear the variety of professions and disciplines, subject matter experts that are in this group, because each of you is starting a reputation of some kind in your classes, in your societies, in your groups, in your community. Believe it or not, your neighbor has a reputation about you. And that is important because of the referrals and the networks that come from that. Because previously you could send your CV to a company and they would probably call you. It doesn't happen that way as often anymore because our industries are changing, and a lot of jobs are actually secured through internal networks, through people going, oh, do you know who I know? This person will be perfect for that job. And that job will never see the internet because it's filled via reputation, it's filled via network. I'm not saying that it's all about who you know, but I think networks do help to build your personal brand. And if we are willing to put ourselves out there, then it's not business as usual. Then it's our business, if that makes sense. You're building your business in your own right. And I had a phone call from someone the other day that I met at a conference, and they said to me, you know, I've never forgot that one conversation we had over tea. I mean, how random, but it just goes to show that you are inputting into people's lives. And although your CV is a useful tool, work is being allocated differently. And so we have to change with that. We're in the 21st century. And so, yeah, we need to step up and step into this new and exciting platform where we can perform in our own way and we don't have to model or be anyone else. And I think that's where the values over time comes back in, because you must talk the talk, sure, but you must also walk that talk. And that leads to talking about authenticity, and we'll speak more about that as we go. My experience, to share with you very honestly, is that reality and social media is not the same. And I'm sure many of you will find that over time. And I think with a personal brand, you want those two not necessarily to be identical, but you want reality to support your social media. If you are an introvert, but you are constantly posting about, you know, being upfront, it's difficult then when someone meets you and says, oh, we have to have you as our lead speaker at the conference. You'll do this. However, even introverts can present. Even introverts can say, okay, well, how about we do a online seminar instead, or how about we do a podcast, or let's write a bunch of blogs. So there are ways of matching your social media with who you are, and not everyone needs to be a poster person. And I think that's important to note, because it can be exhausting to try and compare yourself or meet up with the standards of these big corporations, or even the big influencers of Instagram. You know, you look at some of the pages, and we think to ourselves, well, will I ever match up? Well, actually, you don't need to match up. So here's me giving you the out from that one, because then it's not personal. Then you're just mimicking. And so that's an exciting opportunity for us, because it should be authentic. Numbers aren't everything. And friends of mine have been saying to me all week, can I believe how much spam is on Instagram this week? And that is true, because, you know, everything is fallible if it's not authentically created. And unfortunately, technology can be hacked. And unfortunately, there are ways of people doing things that can make you look like you're an influencer when you're actually not. So that's something to keep in mind, and it's something I've strived for in my own life, which is why I'm sharing so honestly with you, because I would rather tell you the real story than tell you, well, you know, hire someone and take some nice photos and that will be that, because that's not the path of personal branding. Be present to opportunities for building relationships. It doesn't help for you to be unknown, as I said. Conferences, summits, gatherings, even your faculty tea that they have that no one wants to go to. Those are ideal opportunities, because they allow for communication. They allow for your research to be related, in some ways a practice context, but in other ways that's where people start recruiting for their own bigger projects outside of their academic space, or where you start to share, oh, well, I'm learning how to build a website, and someone says, well, that's fantastic, we're starting a project and we need a website. Boom. And it's those conversations that are often unscripted. They're often not in an interview context. You don't have your smart tie on or your high heel shoes. It's really just you me, and our tea, you me over tea yourself. I think partners don't always have to be paid. And this was some advice I was given. That it took me a while to figure out how to link financial benefits out of the partnerships I was creating. And that, I was actually, looking back, a good thing, because I learned that there is value behind a person's skill that doesn't always have to include financial rewards. And real partners want to partner for the cause. And I think that does matter. It doesn't put food on the table, but it does further your personal brand. And I think that that is something to think about as you're going forward, is to see your skills, whatever that may be. We're great at finding literature to support people's ideas. Maybe you're a communicator or creative. I think that can help a person's personal brand. The journalists out there, you want to start connecting with them at grad school level, because they're the ones that can be writing about your project in a year's time. So it's about offering yourself and your skills to projects and get to engage with in your sector. I have a top tip here. It's worked so well for me over the years. Every 6 months, I think about 5 people in my sector that I would love to connect with, and I make an effort to connect with them. Not all of them become mentors, I will be honest with you, but it is a wonderful way to connect with your individual sector. Think about the movers and the shakers out there that you think, oh, I wish I could find out what they're up to. And you don't need to meet with all of them face to face, although that is great. And some people are really open to a 30-minute meeting or a coffee or a lunch to find out, and for you just to ask them, what is happening in the sector? What is your company looking for when they're hiring? How is the recruitment working in my particular sector? You can also ask about the challenges so that when you're developing your projects, you're thinking about solutions that can help the future. I remember writing in my master's dissertation part of a job description of a person that didn't exist. But I knew that my sector needed this person because it was unique. And when I finished writing it, I thought to myself, well, I mean, I could do this. Someone should find me. And it's those kind of conversations that can not only enrich your writing. So for those of you writing up projects, it's really helpful to hear what's happening on the ground, because it endorses what we're reading and learning about, but it also helps you transition from Jessica the professional, or Jessica the student, to Jessica the professional, and you can insert your own name there. I would challenge you to do that, to think to yourself, who would I want to help me transition from a grad student into the working world? Or if you're in the working world, who should be with to my personal brand from professional to consultant? Because you want to be that person that people pick the. Is that fine? Okay. Yeah, so I think that was what I was going to say about that. You want to add meaningfully and prioritize teamwork. This is not a one-man show. And the reason I put that in there is because I think often in academia, we're looking to be the figure people. We're looking to be the first author, or and I say we because I fall prey to it often myself, is we're looking for that credit. You know, I worked hard on that literature review, I should be credited. And that is true, but often we're not working in isolation. And I think there is some humility that goes behind working in a team. When we build a team, we can also make changes when we need to. Okay, let's get practical. And the reason I put this in is because whether you have a brand, or whether you are building a brand, or you've never thought about branding ever, it does matter what you're building it on. The foundations of a house matter, and so do your value base of your brand. And I would challenge you to fill in these 3 blocks of what are the 3 core values upon which you would like to base your brand. I'll give you a hint about what mine, just to share with you. So I meaningfully want to make an impact. And that has been something that has consistently been a lot of work. Relationships and work, you probably hear when whether you're a consultant or an expert, these values should follow you, because they are the way that people will start to speak about you if you think strategically about them. This brings me to my next point, because it really is quality over quantity. You don't need to be at every summit or every conference, but you do need to have focus areas. And while your core value may not change, my experience has been that over time, my focus areas have changed. So when I was in grad school, I was very, very focused on finishing my dissertation. I was focused on finding participants and getting interviews, and I feel like there was very much a research focus to my grad school experience. A little bit of community work that came along with that, but that was very much my focus. And moving into the working world, social work became my focus. I was entering as a social worker, I was defining myself as a social worker, and I loved when people would phone me and say, oh, we heard you're working in early childhood development and we have this issue. That just like made my day, because all of a sudden, there my second focus popped into play. Early childhood development became something that people knew me by, and this doesn't happen overnight. This happens over a course of a number of years, and nutrition was an interesting focus that popped in and out of my sort of last 5 years of work, because I started to engage, like I said, with different disciplines, one of which was the dietetics department and faculty at my university. And that was really exciting, because every time someone needed an article written, for some reason, they kept calling me to say, hey, we're writing on early childhood development, we're talking about nutrition, but we're needing someone to contribute from an education or a community standpoint. And that was really exciting to become that person. Research remained a focus for me and still does to this day. I strongly believe that your grad school career doesn't need to end the day you graduate, because you are learning skills that are meant to take you through continually into your next kind of stage. So I want to move on, because I do want to leave time for us to chat about some other things. But in terms of your online presence and communication, marketing does matter, because what's happening in the real world does need to be known, but also vice versa. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, because actually some of you are probably far more of an expert in Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm very much learning along the way, but my experience has been that you do want your presence to be felt, because you want to be found. I would suggest, if you're maybe a newbie to the online marketing space, to pick 2 or 3 core platforms. Don't overcomplicate life, and don't rely on one platform to be the be all and end all. Don't even allow online to be the be all and end all, because often what is happening in the real world is making a difference, and that drop in the ocean mentality actually does ring true, or it has for me. And like I said, you can be brilliant, but if you're anonymous, it actually doesn't help your brilliance. It doesn't help your project get further if you can't be found. So here's some of my examples I thought I would share with you, because I found newspapers to be super helpful. It's a little bit old school, but people take, the quality isn't so great on some of these pictures, but you get the idea. Whether it's contributing to an opinion piece, or I often let the newspapers know if I'm working on a project that's really interesting, and 9 times out of 10 they are keen to get on board. People want to talk about good news, they want to talk about projects. Believe it or not, they really want to talk about research, because people are starved for facts, they're starved for innovation, and the world is full of fake news. So if you have something meaningful to contribute, why not write to the paper? Let them know what you're up to, and the more I did this, the better I got. The best advice I was given was create more. Someone said to me, you've got all these great ideas, you should do something with it. And I ummed and ahed for so long, but at the end of the day, this was actually the best advice I was given. Keep creating, finding new ways to grow your brand, to grow your projects, to grow your network. Doesn't all have to work, and that's okay. Here we get to the part that you all probably expected, is the fonts and the style. I think the feeling behind your brand does matter. and your branding is the mark that you leave behind. It doesn't mean you need to run out and get a logo tomorrow, but at some point, I found personally it was amazing to have something that articulated my work, that looked beautiful. I'll give you my example in the next slide. Fonts and logos, they do matter, but they're not everything. And I wanted to say that because I think people get very caught up in the chaos of trying to find the perfect font or trying to make something look perfect. But actually, who you are is enough. And if you are able to communicate that in an effective and professional way, then getting the fonts right first time doesn't have to matter. You should care about the look and the feeling. And I thought I'd add that as a little pencil note there, because I believe that refining my look and feel was a huge contributing factor to how I started to secure funding, started to secure clients, and really took my work to the next level. It meant I needed to change. It meant I needed to grow. And every success story will tell you that you cannot stay the same, that you should be adapting. Here's my example. This was my first logo of Relate Your Research. It was an early beginning, but I must admit, I felt it was super cool at the time. I created it myself, and I'm definitely no graphic designer, but it was enough. It was enough to get me started. It was enough to launch my first podcast, and it was enough to get me seen by the faculty, interestingly enough. So what I wanted to share with you today is I hope you are starting to think about starting. Early beginnings mean you've started, rather than looking back going, I wish I'd started this 2 years ago. Yeah. I applied for a lot of funding with my makeshift early days logo. Yes, my first logo, albeit new, it definitely helped me get started. And then as I adapted and realized that there were a lot of podcasts out there, and I was competing with a lot of people all of a sudden. And I thought to myself, there are two ways of going about this. I can keep my brand looking the way that it is, or I can recruit someone into my team. And that would be one of the lessons that I learned along the way, is that you really want to put people around you who can help and support your brand, who can inspire you to level up. And so, and adapting is what the markets are needing right now. The markets are needing people to be thinking differently about services, about the way they provide various opportunities for growth and for career development. We are in a time of life where if people are not innovating, our world will not look the same. And so that you could be a part of that. So this was my new logo, and believe it or not, I secured my first funding with it. I'm not saying the logo did that, but I do feel that the logo assisted me to go from what felt like a bit of a school project to something that was a lot more defined and a lot more refined. So that was my experience, and I would love to share with you some of the people who I brought around me at this time. I'll share some of those details towards the end. We're still doing okay for time. I hope you're still all with me. I am coming in for a landing because I'd love to hear some questions. But in my story, there were high hopes and many a rejection email. A career in social development wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be honest. I wrestled and I challenged the socio-economic climate here in South Africa, because it felt like the needs were so great, and what could I do about it? I'm one small person, and it felt like no amount of funding was going to solve some of the economic challenges and the socio-historical challenges that our country has. So I began to create a brand intentionally that was transferable, it was relatable, and it allowed me to explore many possibilities to pitch, whether it was for funding or grants, business partnerships, online platforms, scholarships. And right there at the bottom, it was rejection, rejection, rejection email after rejection email, until I started finding the winners. And I want to suggest to you that applying for something is more than just the end goal in mind. It really is the journey along the way. Where's my There we go. I pitched, I kept pitching. I presented, I pitched again. And the reason I share these with you is because if I were to get personal with you for a moment, I would share that, well, was I nervous about it? Was I nervous about putting myself out there? Yeah, I really, really was. I was nervous because I felt like if I didn't put myself out there, my project wouldn't be known, but I was nervous because what if I was rejected? Did I doubt myself often? Was everyone a big fan of my project? Not really. But that was okay because I found some big fans, and those fans have stuck with me all along. Did I get paid for everything? No. Did it take hours to prepare? Sometimes it did. But what I did find was that I was able to create a folder and a database of information that I could use and adapt for any situation because I'd applied for so many different things. And that is something that I would suggest is something that young grad students start to think about, because your CV is just one document in a pool of things that you can create. Lastly, any regrets? Well, I wish I looked back and could say to myself, start earlier, start to create, start to make your mark, not only when you graduate. Graduation is a milestone, but it's not the starting point, and you can start whenever you feel ready. There we go. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we've thought about it a lot, and you can all come back and check out this slide if you're interested. But I believe that a personal approach to branding means you have to learn to adapt. And we have spoken about this throughout the time that we've been together. Being in grad school doesn't disqualify you. You should be asking for feedback. Feedback is important. Constantly remove that fear from within you that says, no, stop. Those are restraining kind of thoughts, and that mindset often captivates us within ourselves. But create processes and products to preserve your learning. And that was my experience with my podcast. Was I really felt that in South Africa, social work researchers didn't have a easy to access platform to preserve learning, and journals were expensive to publish in. So a podcast was ideal. That was my experience. Maybe you will think of far more innovative ways of sharing, whether it's tools or technology, but you should be rethinking the way that we learn. Be encouraged to learn new skills, whether that's innovation or green thinking. Everyone's talking green these days. So for those environmentalists around us, you guys should be partnering. And research should be a part of our learning, and the way that we communicate our brand can endorse our research. So my question to you is, where are you in your journey? Are you in grad school? Are you in the working world? Are you working your way towards being an entrepreneur? Remember that it's not linear, but it is progressive. You can progress. And how are you preserving or growing that invisible CV of yours? So yes, that is me.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Let's give her a round of applause, some clap emojis or the reaction in the chat. Thank you everyone also for just being so cool and bouncing back. That I'm not gonna act like it didn't throw me off, y'all, because it did. Yes. But Jessica, thank you for rolling with it. Also, y'all, you also heard the little skip in the session. I lost some of your questions in the chat, unfortunately. So if you can scroll back, like if one person like will maybe raise their hand, I'll like unmute you to read some of the questions in case I forget one. But Jessica, one thing I kept seeing and I remember was people want to know, should they have a separate account for their research, like a separate Instagram or separate Twitter, and then their personal Twitter? Maybe having those together or separate?
100%. It's such a good question. I initially, and this was just my experience, I'll share a personal and a professional opinion on this topic. Personally, I felt that there became a time when having a personal account as my professional account wasn't helpful because there were life changes that were happening in my life that wasn't always relevant or necessary for that to be shared with the working world. And in grad school, it was less necessary because a lot of what I was doing was related to my work in my personal life, because that was just the type of experience that I was having. What I did find, however, is once I started a separate account, and sure, managing multiple accounts is also exhausting, and that should be noted. But it is helpful because you then hone your audience, and you then have an account that you're creating content specifically for your research, which can translate one day into a sales funnel, into an opportunity to pitch or to say, hey, did you know I received this grant? You can get in on this too. It's an opportunity to learn and say, hey, I've got a project and I'm needing a botanist. Get the botanist on board, or I'm needing a journalist. And all of a sudden, people that are within that community that have seen your work can hear about it that aren't necessarily your high school friends. And that would be my personal opinion. Professionally, some people would say to you from a branding perspective that it can be one and the same and it doesn't matter. So that would be one school of thought. And the other school of thought would say, don't share anything personal on your professional branding platforms. I disagree with that because I feel that who we are is what we're selling. Intrinsically, if you partner with me, you're not only partnering with me, but you're partnering with the values that I bring and my experience. And I would like you to know that every now and again this happened in my life, and that not every day is perfect, but I don't necessarily need to share with you what I had for supper, for example.
Sure.
So yes, I
That.
hope that answers those questions.
I think so. We have about 7 minutes, so I'm gonna give you a little bit lightning round for these questions, okay?
Brilliant.
First, I want to say shout out to Brianna. Thank you so much for going back in the chat and copying and pasting these for me. First, Crystal asks, how can we further develop our network beyond social media into meaningful relationships such as mentorships and professional relationships?
Sure. I think it's a question of consistency over time. People, for example, are on Instagram for moments. Generally, it's not a long enough duration for you to build a meaningful relationship quickly. And that's why continually posting is helpful, because you start to engage with your community often. And which is how I came to be on this platform, to be honest, is I started seeing content that I thought to myself, now this is something. And the more you engage, the more you start to create those relationships. And when the opportunity arises, all of a sudden there's a partnership opportunity. So that's one way.
Okay.
The other way is to be quite direct and to send a message to say, hi there, I see your account. I'm also in this field and I'd love to stay connected. So to make your intentions quite known, and to also respect the boundaries, I suppose, of that. My experience has been is if you get the moment to make an online relationship real in reality, that's the win. That's how you secure relationships and grow your networks, is if you see that person around your campus, or if you hear that they're talking at a conference that's in your area, go to it. And afterwards, stick around. And it takes a bit of character building to go up to a person and say, hi, I have you in my literature review, but yeah. I just thought I'd say a shout out. And that's important because people remember meaningful connections like that. And it can literally just be a hello, but I appreciate your work. But it's those kind of thoughtful opportunities to connect that can really grow your network. I would say don't stop being present to what is happening in your sector is probably the best advice.
I think that's perfect. Okay, so let's keep them like 30-second responses. I know it's gonna be
okay. Sorry.
No worries, because I want to get as many questions as possible too.
100%.
Before we get to our 9 o'clock. Is the notion of branding itself? This is from S. A settler colonial corporate framework of seeing the body and mind as a commodity in a neoliberal society. So how can we reframe to center our humanity and our expertise? So how can we switch the focus from, selling and more so focus on us as humans and our expertise and the skills that we're
We've
bringing?
got some thinkers in the room,
Oh,
that's for
absolutely.
sure.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And we should be having these conversations. It should feel awkward. We should be calling out the markets that are making this harder than it is. So yeah, good stuff with this one. I don't think the question is as easily answered as we would hope. I think there is history, and potentially a neoliberal view would say the best brand will win. That's what it would say. And I would challenge that to say the most authentic brand could last. And that's what you want to do, is stick around. When your sector is in chaos, believe it or not, South Africa's early childhood development sector is a struggling sector. We have mothers and grandmothers looking after children in small rooms, and you would think that it would be a priority, and it isn't. So sorry, quick answer to that is stick around.
No, okay, got it. And we have 3 minutes, y'all, and then you all know you saw me scrambling yesterday to get on Instagram. The next one was, this is from Carmen. She asks, how do you balance your online presence with your schoolwork? So if we're gonna be a grad student and we wanna have a podcast, or we wanna have a blog or a vlog or an Instagram page, how do we create balance?
Yeah. Okay, quick answer. And this also links very much to day one of the summit and talking about managing that life. But I think to bracket your time management becomes really important, and prioritize the platforms that you know your network is on. You know that you can see growth, not fake growth, not randoms, but when you see real growth, use that as a sign that this is worth investing in. I would also, and this is a life experience of my own, is try not to get consumed by one thing. So to spend time, make it excellent, and move on, because it does allow you to get back to your schoolwork. Because it can be super fun creating content, but we also need to be matching our real life with that, and supper needs to be cooked. So yes.
Yes, I completely agree. Okay, it's gonna be our last question. Bonnie, thank you for emailing me the whole chat thread. I appreciate it. I saw one question I thought was really good. Oh gosh. Hold on. Oh, that was it. We asked that one. Any thoughts on rebranding by using an already established platform versus starting all the way over? That's from Jaleesa.
I think rebranding has its place. I think it's totally necessary from time to time. And as you transition from Judith the student to Mirinda the professional to Shanna, so nice to see everyone's names now, to Shanna the consultant or Alexis the expert, like as you're able to say, hey Bonnie, I see that you're no longer a student. Now you've graduated. Your brand will change. That will happen. So I totally back rebranding. I think it should be done thoughtfully and with a lot of transparency. So instead of just becoming a sales platform, let your audience know what's happening and how you plan to keep your values the same, even though your focuses are changing.
I love it. Well, let's give Jessica another hand clap emojis in the inbox. Y'all, we are wrapping up day 2. Jessica, thank you so much for sharing all of this insight. It has been amazing. Thank you so much. If you all have an IG, go over to my Instagram. I'm about to go live like right now. And I see all the thanks dropping in the chat for your information, Jessica. Make sure you're following her. I'm gonna share all of the social medias for all of our speakers in the emails as well. So take care. I will see y'all in 2 seconds. Thank you, Jessica.
Bye everyone.